that a lot of players do over time is they get their elbow to move diagonal, okay? Now, a lot of that's because the face is more shut, so the arm will move back and front, okay? We're gonna go into a bunch of different little things, but I want you to understand. A lot of the things you gotta understand is, as they're doing that and they're turning, as they turn in this lead arm. That stretch, that adduction across the chest creates the hands moving where? Backwards. That's what gets it external. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, a lot of people, as they do that, their elbow doesn't go diagonal, and where's the elbow go? It goes split. So as they do that, what happens? Now it's internal, now it's narrow, okay? So the other third thing that I talk about is width, okay? If we actually get this thing moving diagonal, but there's no width, and we have it external, because that's still external, it's still steep. So then that causes the tilt to stand up, all these weird things. So we look from all three of those different dimensions we're looking at, either this. So when I see guys like Sergio, who is wide, and he is external, but his elbow comes straight down, that's another one as long as all these other ones are, right? So when I look at it and I find somebody that's steep or their arms get stuck behind them, I always look at, well, is that because they didn't turn in the backswing, or are they good here and their hips going up and it's causing them to have no room here? Because anytime you look at depth, if I turn, okay, and I said, I'm gonna grab this, look at how much shoulder turn I have. Let's say I have no shoulder turn. See how wide my arm is? Now it's narrow. It's gotta be slammed behind me, because if I put it in front, I have no depth, which is gonna cause me to stand up or tilt. So all these little things that calculate in my head, why are people either steep, why are they pulling down?
I think the lack of depth is my issue.
A lack of depth or lack of turn.
Because I haven't been doing this, which means I don't have depth.
Exactly. So if we have no depth, and so another element is wrist angles. So if I come up here and I start to cock my wrist too much, what does that do to my hand? Is that putting it more into, that's radial, right? So radial is putting my hand into extension, number one, which is making it more open, which makes me never want to move where? Here, because the face would be too open. It would always make me want to move here. That's one. Number two, the more I cock it, what's that hand doing? Is that pronation or supination? That's pronation, right?
Yeah.
Because supination would be this way. So I'm pronating my wrist. My arm is getting where? More narrow.
Yeah.
So as soon as it gets more narrow, we can't go here, because the more we go here in front of us, it's up on our neck. Okay, so how many people do you know that throw all their angles and get it back on plane? Never. Okay, it's always you start turning and things start getting closer to you. Okay, so my point being here with you is, I heard you say I want to get my elbows close together. Okay, which will help. Okay, I heard you say that on your thing. When I get my elbows together, is that changing the shaft angle? Not unless I have this go internal. So if I do that with that, or this moving, because that's not technically getting me external, is it? That's getting it more external. So putting the elbows together for you is not bad. Why? Because when you raise your hips, your elbows get where? Where do they get? Split. When you raise your hips up.
Oh, by split, you're talking about that.
Yeah, look at the elbows split behind me. And by doing that, what would that do if I kept my elbows closer? It would keep my legs from going into this early upward motion, and it would actually sequence you out a little better. So I wanted you to understand, when you think about all these things, is that most of my players will have their elbow moving diagonal. What's helping it move more diagonal? Rotation and what? Face. Okay. What is face doing when it's not too cupped? It's also allowing the arm to stay where? Wider. Okay. When it's wider, the arm can get back in front. If the arm's narrow, we're always going to slip it back behind us. So all these things is, to me, if we turn and we get depth and we have the right face and the right structure, like you were just asking, things will happen by themselves in the downswing, and that's what you led to, correct? Okay. Now here's another thing. When I look at Wolf, does Wolf have very much wrist cock? No. Because if I have wrist cock and I'm across the line, what is that doing? That's adding what? Narrowness, and you're not going to pull that thing out. Wolf is wider with less wrist cock, equals when he goes this way, it's very shallow and his arm's back in front of him. So things to be aware of, if you don't turn and you get narrow and you have a lot of wrist angles, you're not going to get that club back in front of you. You're not. It's just not going to happen. And I think when you do feel like this, your legs aren't going to just go like this. They're not going to jump. They're going to want to stay in front of you. So you watch that over and over, and if you have questions on what I said, I'd be happy to slow it down.